Today, my special guest is Kris Krane, founder and president of 4Front Ventures Corp, trading on the OTC under the symbol FFNTF and trading in Canada under FFNT. Kris, welcome.
Great, thanks for having me.
You bet. Kris, 4Front Ventures, I followed the story for a long time because I actually went and shot video at a couple of sites of the predecessor company. So tell me about the story of 4Front, because I find it intriguing and sort of emblematic of how the cannabis industry has had to sort of bob and weave to get to the point where 4Front Ventures is, where founders have been sort of replaced by the guys with the big boy pants on, and now it's a real business.
Sure. Well, at 4Front, we started 10 years ago now, actually as a consulting firm. We worked with a number of early startups in the space, helped them get licensed through competitive licensing processes, help them stand up their dispensaries. We then sort of morphed into being operators ourselves, went out and acquired some licenses, won some licenses. And the one piece that we were struggling the most with was large-scale cultivation production, at scale. And so we wound up merging with a company called Canex out of Washington State, who were we found the best producers at scale that we had seen anywhere in the industry. Right. And that really sort of filled in that last major piece of the puzzle for us. And so now we're focused on large-scale production of consumer packaged goods, as well as running high-end retail experiences in our states around the country, particularly in places where we can vertically operate and operate within adult use or soon-to-be adult use markets.
Right. Yes, it was Canex that I was actually peripherally involved with a couple of years ago, and we went and shot some video of a company that Canex was examining the possibility of acquiring, but they didn't. So 4Front came along and acquired Canex as a method to go public then. That's
correct. Yeah. So it was we treated it as a merger. Technically, it was an RTO, but for all intents and purposes, it really was a true merger. The Canex team took over the entire cultivation production side of the business. The folks at 4Front continue to largely run the sort of retail and the capital markets side of things. We have had some turnover since then, as I think most in the industry have. We've had to sort of refocus a bit on where we're strongest and divest in some areas that were less core. But by and large, it really was a true merger of not just assets, but of skill sets, which at the time we did it, I think was fairly unique in the industry when most were looking at, what states do you have and what states do we have and how do we match those together? We were really looking at what are your operational strengths, what are our operational strengths, and trying to find a company that merged really well with those. And so it was both an asset merge, but really much more of a skill set merge. And I think that set us up for the kind of success that we're seeing today.
Okay, so tell me, what is the footprint of 4Front at this point in terms of dispensaries versus cultivation versus extraction and consumer product production?
Well, it's really all of the above. So it depends a bit on what state that we're in. In just about every state right now, we are vertical. Michigan, we're retail only, although we do intend to enter the cultivation production side of that state. We're vertical in Massachusetts, in Illinois. Washington, we are cultivation and production only because Washington does not allow vertical integration. So we are the largest producer wholesaler in the state. We have 7 of the top 10 selling edible brands in that state. And we're getting ready to bring most of those best-selling Washington brands into the California market by the middle of this year, where we'll be launching the largest, almost entirely automated production facility, we believe, in the country. And we think that should be somewhat disruptive to the California market, where we hope to be able to produce particularly edible products, but infused products in general, at a price point that's not just competitive with what's out there on the legal and regulated market, but also competitive with what's out there on the sort of the legacy gray market, Prop 215 market, which really is the biggest competition that licensed businesses in California have today.
Let's see. Okay, so then the advent of the Biden-Harris administration and their expected contribution to the regulatory landscape in the United States, what are the sort of risks and opportunities for 4Front in that context? What do you think they're going to do first?
Well, that's the billion-dollar question right now. Nobody really knows exactly what this administration is going to do. I think, the thing I like to say is with the Senate flipping from Republican to Democrat, with the Democrats winning those 2 seats in Georgia a few weeks ago, we basically went from safe banking and access to banking being our likely best case scenario in the next 2 years to probably our worst case scenario in the next 2 years, meaning that's the and by worst case, it's a very good worst case scenario, right? Yeah. I think that banking is if not inevitable, it's extremely likely now. But we're likely to see even further reforms. I think something like the MORE Act, or at least the MORE Act, is likely to be the foundation for a broader descheduling bill. I think that proposal will receive serious consideration in both the House and the Senate, where leadership has said that they support that. And obviously, the federal government starting to bring the walls down on our 70-plus year disastrous experiment with prohibition can only lead to more opportunities for 4Front and everybody else in the industry.
Sure. So do you think interstate commerce in the cannabis space broadly is one of the options that's on the table?
It's absolutely on the table. If something like the MORE Act were to pass or descheduling were to pass, that likely would open up some form of interstate commerce. Now, what that looks like and how long that takes to implement is a whole other question. And there are a lot of different scenarios there. I would point to the hemp, the hemp legalization in the Farm Bill a few years ago as a good example of just how long these things take, right? It's been a couple of years since we legalized hemp, and yet the FDA is still working through their rulemaking process. So I don't think just because the law passes, that means interstate commerce happens the next day. It may very well be 2 to 5 years before it can practically be implemented. And it's also quite possible that the federal government leaves a lot of this up to the states. And so states may have a choice whether or not they want to legalize, and if they do, whether they want to allow products to flow in or out of their states. So you might wind up having a patchwork of interstate commerce, with certain states being exporter states, others being importer states, others deciding they want everything to remain within the confines of their states. All of those are within the realm of possibility, but that will largely depend on what the ultimate federal legislation looks like, and that is still very much an open question.
You bet. Okay, so then how does 4Front strategize getting the attention of investors in the environment that, at this point, from where I sit, seems to be dominated by a few major interstate players who have managed to generate significant, 9-figure baseline revenue? I'm talking about Curaleaf, Trulieve, etc. Are you finding that a very difficult competitive environment, or do you find it just so early stage that there's lots of opportunity for you to shoehorn yourself in there?
Well, it's somewhat in between, right? I mean, as long as it's still not federally legal and there isn't full access to banking and financial services and institutional investment, this is a challenging environment for everybody. Even those big players, right, still have their challenges raising capital the way that they would if they were in just a normal and fully legal regulated environment. Mm-hmm. So there's certainly challenges there for everybody. But I think by and large, this is a sort of a rising tide raises all ships type of scenario. As more federal reforms happen, and even just exuberance around potential federal reforms. I mean, we saw on the morning after the Georgia election, almost all cannabis companies saw something like a 15 to 20% jump in their stock values, just based on speculation, right? Investor speculation that we're going to see more substantive federal reform. We're going to see more access to institutional capital in the banking sector. And I think that was positive for everybody across the board. For us as a company, what we're really focused on, and I think the best thing that we can do to be well situated, regardless of how this plays out, is to really focus on our core competency of producing really good quality products at a price point better than anybody in the market can produce. And if we can do that, we're going to have a nice, profitable company on our own. And we'll also be well set up to be, say, an acquisition target for a larger company that has focused on capital markets, has focused on building a large license portfolio, but may not have honed in quite as well on operational efficiency at scale, which ultimately, as these walls start to come down, is going to become increasingly important. So I think we set ourselves up for multiple paths, either of which would be a successful path for us as a company. And that's the smartest thing that we can do right now in a time when there's still uncertainty ahead, but still lots of opportunity in the market today. You bet.
Kris, that's a great overview. I appreciate your time today. We're going to come back to you and follow the story with interest. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Bye for now.